Eric Henderson of Slant Magazine calls this movie one of the most compelling validations of the Western genre's most elemental touchstones. Michael Wilmington calls it an improbable masterpiece, a bizarre mixture of grandly operatic visuals, grim brutality, and sordid violence that keeps wrenching you from one extreme to the other. And Letterboxd user Branson Reese says a lot of times I'll see a classic movie and be like, this is what everyone's going crazy for, but this was one where I was like, oh man, people are underselling it actually. On this episode of Ruined Childhoods, we decide the fate of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. That was an awful Clint Eastwood. Greetings, Starfighters. Sorry, I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to be me. No, that was a bad
Yeah, I think
choice.
that's a good idea. We'll talk all things Clint Eastwood maybe not all things Clint Eastwood, but some things Clint Eastwood pretty
Forget
soon.
I did that. Greetings, Starfighters. All of the Starfighters. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes, this is the final film in our month of movies that have coined popular phrases, such as the bucket list, the Full Monty, which was redefined by the movie The Full Monty. What else did we do? Gaslight,
yeah.
And then Hall Pass. And now here is the good, the bad, and the ugly, which has crept into modern vernacular. You hear it all over the place.
Yeah, we don't even, it's, whenever it's kind of like a good news, bad news type thing. And it's, it's used in so many different, contexts, and it's adapted to different things. There's even like the movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that this one really stuck, but, We'll come to that pretty soon. Dan, I don't have any news bits or one more things about Hall Pass or anything. Do you have anything that you wanted to bring up? I mean, we're recording this on, Wednesday the 24th, and allegedly there might be some sort of news about a Last Starfighter sequel stuff.
We are on high alert
tomorrow.
We are on high alert for some Last Starfighter news. And
yeah, speaking of greetings, Starfighters.
Yeah. So, of course, if you've been following the podcast, then you know we're huge Last Starfighter fans. If you haven't been following the podcast, first of all, welcome. You're a Starfighter. Welcome. You've been recruited by Star League, or I guess you volunteered. We did that episode about a year and a half ago. We did an episode on The Last Starfighter and discussed all the possibilities, and I don't know, there could be something. And it's funny because we talk about how, a new interpretation or a new addition to, something building off of a film or an IP, an intellectual property that we grew up with, doesn't necessarily ruin your childhood. But when it comes to something like The Last Starfighter, I get very nervous, excited, because it's kind of like, if it's not the right thing.
Well, this is something that is being brought to life by the writer of Rogue One, which it's towards the top of my favorite Star Wars movies list. I know, Dan, that you certainly are an, original trilogy enthusiast, and I am too, maybe to a lesser extent, but I think that Rogue One sits up there among those three as being just like a truly fantastic. Everything about it's just really beautiful.
And here's where I'm optimistic is that Rogue One did a wonderful job of capturing the spirit of the original trilogy without being kind of derivative fan service, which is what I found a lot of the prequels and the sequels to be.
The sequels.
I feel like Last Jedi is kind of the outlier, where Whereas I felt like Force Awakens, definitely Force Awakens, but to an extent, Rise of Skywalker, were doing a lot of catering to fans and a lot of references, a lot of nudge, wink, wink stuff. Whereas The Last Jedi, really kind of did its own thing. And I mean, in fact, according to some fans, went against, I guess, what they had built up in their mind as the meaning.
Well, I don't care. Whatever happens with The Last Starfighter, I'm excited about it.
But that it's Gary Whitta, the screenwriter of Rogue One, and that he's the one who's doing this gives me a little more hope. Yes. Yeah. There is hope. A new hope, if you will.
Oh, boy. Okay. So, Dan, let's talk a little bit about spaghetti westerns. Dan, are you a big fan of westerns in general?
I've had a complicated relationship with westerns. I mean, it's not that complicated. It's really, westerns are a genre that possibly more than any other genre, I really want to like more than I do.
Yeah.
Like, I love the idea of kicking back and watching a Western, and particularly the Westerns that were made in the 1960s and 70s.
Sure.
They just are, and we're going to talk about this with Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because it's just a beautiful film. But these movies that were created at a different time, and the spaghetti westerns, particularly that were filmed outside of that were made by Italian filmmakers and filmed in, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was filmed mostly in Spain, but
mostly in Spain, right?
Filmed in Europe, where there was perhaps more of this land available to shoot on and to believably be, the Old West. Like, I think Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is mostly set around Texas.
I can't remember exactly.
It's a little tough to,
Sure. It's also important to note that it takes place right in the middle of the Civil War. And what I wasn't expecting was how heavily the Civil War played into this. And, especially coming from an Italian filmmaker, how much of, American history, and, it was at this point only 100 years in the future. It seems so much further in the past than that, even though, the Civil War, it wasn't all that long ago. And, and I don't know, like, just thinking about how at that time there were still people there could have been people alive who were around during the Civil War, or, they'd be very young at the time, but I don't know. It's just like a little bit more recent, and just the idea that they're covering so much American political, like, it's almost like, and I wouldn't say it's an allegory, but, they're tying in the whole struggle between the Union and the Confederate armies into this story about these three bad dudes.
Well, at least one of them is bad. The other is good, and the other is ugly. I mean, they're all.
I'm gonna go ahead and venture to say they're all pretty bad.
Hey, that's why they call the game Bad Dudes. Sorry, Parenthood. So, one thing I'd seen like part of this movie before, but had never seen the entire movie, did not realize how much of a role the Civil War would play in it. And this is what kind of sets it apart. So, like, a lot of Westerns that are great Westerns, it revolves around a personal conflict, something that is brewing. And, everything from High Noon, Tombstone, Young Guns. I mean, I know there's a lot of other Westerns I'm not thinking of. I haven't seen a lot of the classic Westerns. I'm working.
Neither have I. This is a genre that I'm very unfamiliar with, and I was very nervous coming into The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I mean, I started it one night, saw that it was 3 hours long, and was like, I need to save this for. I need to save it for a night, for the next night, and better prepare myself for a 3-hour movie where, you know, the dialogue is, in some cases, dubbed. Well, I think it's all ADR'd at the very least.
Yeah.
And so it's like things just, I'm going to have to concentrate a lot harder. I turned the captions on because I didn't want to miss anything, and I wanted to be forced to like read it, and so to better retain it, because I was like, I know this is going to be a slow burn of a movie with some like peaks here and there, but like I was wondering at the end if I even really needed to work to concentrate that hard, because it was riveting.
It is, for such a sprawling film, and the setup is so simple, but it's so not about what it's about. You know, these three guys looking for gold.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. All right. So, a hitman known as Angel Eyes is on a hunt to recover a large sum of money and learns that the man who knows the location is going by the name Bill Carson. Angel Eyes runs in a similar circle with two other men of questionable integrity, a known felon named Tuco and an unnamed gunslinging part-time bounty hunter that is known only to Tuco as Blondie. Blondie and Tuco are running a grift in which Blondie captures Tuco and delivers him to a small-town sheriff to collect the bounty. When Tuco is about to be hung, Blondie shoots the noose from afar, as well as the hats off of anyone nearby. The two disappear and split the bounty amongst themselves and watch it rise. At a certain point, Blondie decides to cut ties with Tuco and leaves him high and dry in the desert. Tuco manages to make it to a small town, gets himself a gun, and hunts down Blondie for revenge. After torturing him for a few dehydrated days, they encounter a group of injured Confederate soldiers. One of them happens to be the man going by Bill Carson. With some of his final breaths, he tells Tuco the location of $200,000 that he buried in a graveyard. But then, he manages to tell Blondie the name of the grave in which the money is buried. Now that Tuco and Blondie are again reliant on one another, they travel to the location that only Tuco knows, disguised as Confederate soldiers, Tuco specifically as Bill Carson. After they mistake a group of approaching travelers as Confederate soldiers, they proudly display their new duds. What they don't realize is that they're simply Union soldiers covered in dirt. Blondie and Tuco are captured and delivered to a prisoner holding area patrolled by none other than Angel Eyes, likely waiting for the day when Bill Carson is captured. He recognizes Tuco and Blondie and discovers that Tuco has assumed Bill Carson's identity, so he makes a meal out of torturing him to get information. Tuco ends up spilling the beans about the location, but rats Blondie out as knowing the name on the grave. Tuco and Blondie manage to escape, and the three are now all on a race to the cemetery. Blondie and Tuco meet one major obstacle. The one bridge that leads them to the finish line is stationed with Union and Confederate soldiers, each with the goal of keeping the bridge intact, much to the chagrin of the Union captain they befriend. After the captain is shot in battle, Tuco and Blondie blow up the bridge so the war can move on. This leads to an iconic three-way shootout between Angel Eyes, Blondie, and Tuco. So, Clint Eastwood plays Blondie, or the man with no name. We've got Lee Van Cleef as Angel Eyes and Eli Wallach as Tuco. And the three of them, I mean, I gotta say, like, Eli Wallach is absolutely incredible. And Lee Van Cleef, he's great too. I do have problems with Clint Eastwood. But I felt like...
I thought you were going to say you had problems with the Jewish actor from Brooklyn playing a Mexican bandit, but...
Look, we just have to understand that
that
happened.
That's the acknowledgement. We are acknowledging it. And, we could go back to the party to talk about that with Peter Sellers. But regardless, Eli Wallach is... Yes, he's brilliant in this. But
he is. If you just look past that aspect of it, yes. My issues with Clint Eastwood, and I feel like he's good in this because I feel like with him, the less he can speak, the better. Because the more he starts talking, the less I can really, I don't know, sit with his character as a character. I don't know. I don't think he's a very good actor. I was just watching In the Line of Fire, and I was like, oh, it's so painful to watch him like try to be like a romantic lead and joke around with people. Like, it can be kind of difficult.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hit or miss. I do think that in this movie, it's, he's strong because he doesn't say much, and Clint Eastwood is at his
Exactly.
best. His introduction, when we first meet him in this, it is so awesome, and you're just like, as soon as like, he says his first line, you don't even see his face, and you're just like, oh, it's about to go down.
Well, why don't we play that clip that I titled in my notes here, Clintro. And so this is the first time where we see Tuco is trying to be captured by these other bounty hunters.
He's wanted.
And then
Tuco is wanted.
He is a wanted.
There's a price
very
on
much
his head.
so.
Hey, amigo, you know you've got a face beautiful enough to be worth $2,000?
Yeah. But you don't look like the one who collected. A couple steps back.
And there's that iconic score.
That music it's part of the zeitgeist. It's whenever there's that type of showdown in almost anything where there's a any type of like Old West stand. I think even in one of the police academies, there's a part where where Michael Winslow does the the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So this actually, watching this movie brought back like a memory for me, and this was something that you had that like I borrowed, but I remember listening to a tape of just a compilation of famous movie scores, because like there were, I don't remember like where I got this, but I just remember like listening to it, like laying in bed, listening, because there were parts of the score where it's like just listening to the whole thing in its entirety, where it's like, I don't know where else I would have just like listened to this entire thing. And it just kind of came back to me a little bit.
Could very well have been a mixtape made back in the day.
Who's putting that on a mixtape?
Me. Like me in, I don't know. I feel like was there Danny Elfman on there?
Look, probably.
I mean,
maybe it was. I don't know.
There you go. If it had the Raiders March, if it had, I remember I don't think Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was on it, but I had a mixtape. It had the music from Driving Miss Daisy on it. Oh yeah, because I made it for the car, and
oh my God.
So
wow.
This was a long time ago. Okay, long time ago. So. First of all, Ennio Morricone is
yes.
a genius.
Pour one out.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Once Upon a Time in the West?
I don't think so.
It's so Leone made that after this, I believe.
Okay.
And it starred Henry Fonda in a role. It was kind of similar to the Lee Van Cleef role.
Mm.
I mean, although he was much more of like the bad guy. He was an assassin who was hired by like the railroad baron to basically get rid of any like if anyone was in the way of where the railroad was going to go. It was his job to kind of take care of them.
Got it.
And it was like Charles Bronson is in it. It's Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, and Jason Robards.
Huh.
So yeah, it's Claudia Cardinal is in it as well. And I watched that not too long ago. That's another one that I had seen parts of, or I'd just seen the beginning of it and something, and like, I don't know, I guess it's a 3-hour movie and it's a Western. And these movies move Leone, and I'm, far from an expert in his movies, but this Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America, they are sprawling stories. And what I found after watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was, I was like, this movie goes over 3 hours, but there wasn't anything I would have cut. And everything that happens is either it's progressing the action, it's showing you more about the characters. And I think maybe that's where I'm seeing that, like, the issue with Clint Eastwood in the movie is because he has the least, like, his character has like the least stake. We don't know much about his character.
Yeah, I think that the one problem that I have is that I think that the reason why we really root for him, and if we're going back in time to when this movie came out, I mean, this is part of the, the Fistful of Dollars, like, trilogy, and what's that?
I was putting trilogy in quotes because
trilogy in quotes,
it's not
right? It's, they're in the same family.
They're
not,
three Westerns with the same director and same star that I guess are kind of similar. And I don't think he's technically playing the same character, but I guess the idea is you can't tell.
I think he is. He's the man with no name. And according to IMDb trivia, the poncho that he wears is one that he wears in all of them. So, although it doesn't make its appearance until the end of...
He also wears it in other movies that have nothing to do with this one, I think I read.
Who knows? Yeah. Whatever. So, and before that, he was on Rawhide. He really...
I think he wore it in the bridges of Madison County.
Where was I going with this?
I think we were still talking about Eastwood. Eastwood's
work. It's just like
right.
So I think that the whole reason why we think that he's the person that we're rooting for is because we're told at the beginning that he is the good. And it's literally written under his face when we see him. It says the good, and who's the ugly, and who's the bad. The bad being Angel Eyes, and the ugly being Tuco. And I mean, I think that they're all pretty bad. There's, they're just kind of always grifting and stabbing each other in the back. Yeah.
It's hard to not root for Tuco, and I think that's because you find out the most about Tuco, which could also be that it's appropriate that Eli Wallach has the bulk of the dialogue.
Yeah.
And
he's tremendous.
He's got that great scene. Which scene?
With his brother?
Yes, the scene with the brother, yeah.
Yeah, his brother who became a priest and has a little camp set up for injured
He's the mission at San
soldiers.
Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, they take people from both sides of the war and fix them up, and that's how they rehydrate the man with no name, Blondie, and kind of keep him for a few days. And it's funny. Yeah, it's their interaction about being brothers and the one becoming a priest so he could run away from like the problems. Like, it's such a awesome scene. Like it was complex. Unexpected.
Yeah,
it was. I did not see it coming, and I'm so glad it did.
And that's what I'm saying is, and that's like, I mean, what, like 2 hours into the movie or something, or beyond 2 hours, I think, into the movie. And it's like, we're still learning things and we're still developing. And it's the type of character development that I think would just be truncated and rushed in most other films, or just not done. But like, he builds, and I guess if I had any qualm, it's that the other characters aren't as, I don't know, I guess sympathetic. And even though you're rooting for Blondie and you're, whatever, amused by Tuco and you don't hate him, it's almost like that shootout at the end, which I was in awe of
Oh, yeah. It stands the test of time.
it stands the test of time while you're sitting there watching it, and
Yeah.
it goes on, and
Yeah.
it
And
feels real. It feels real.
But the other thing is that, like, you know, because we know what kind of movie this is, we know who's gonna walk away the victor. You know, it's not like there's gonna be some big surprise. And, you know, we'll just spoiler if you haven't seen it, but, you know, Blondie shoots Angel Eyes dead, and no one else knows that Tuco's gun has no bullets in it because Blondie removed them. So what Blondie does is he ties a noose to a tree and has Tuco stand on a
Like, I'd say gravestone. It's not a stone. It's a wooden cross.
It's not a stone. It's a cross made of two pieces of wood. And and just kind of like rides away, and then eventually shoots the rope down, just kind of like leaving Tuco there.
And I'm sorry if you covered this in the synopsis, but that's what Tuco and Blondie kind of, that's their little hustle that they're running towards the beginning of the movie. Okay, yeah.
I did mention that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really cool that it comes back to that. It closes on that, and the shootout, there's so many things about it. And it's like, yes, you know, Blondie is going to win, but you don't know that he's going to spare Tuco.
No, that's true.
You don't know. You don't know.
He also leaves Tuco half of the money.
Yeah, he leaves. Yeah, half and half.
I guess that's what makes him the good.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
he's
ultimately
not completely rotten.
Right. And it ends with Eli Wallach watching Clint Eastwood riding away, and he's screaming like, "Blondie!" And do you have that clip?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly. Yeah, so this one will start where he's got the noose around his neck, and Blondie has kind of ridden off a little bit. And in some of the clips that I grabbed for this, I did take out some of the times, like some of the gaps where there's just atmosphere.
Yeah.
Unless it has to do with keeping the music fresh. But this one begins where he's already got the noose around his neck.
Hey, Blondie. Sorry, Tuco.
I love they start with the drum.
Blondie!
And it gets louder and louder.
Yeah.
Blondie!
Oh, what's your favorite new wave band?
Blondie!
And you just see his feet on the tombstone, in quotes, just kind of like losing itself. And yeah.
Hey, what's your favorite old school comic strip?
Blondie!
What type of baked good do you prefer, a brownie or a...
Blondie!
I love the build of the music. Oh. You feel his, you feel for Tuco.
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Blondie!
The drums come back in. So at this point, Blondie's got the gun and he's aiming it.
And I love it. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Hey, Blonde! You know what you are! Just a dirty son of a
It's delicious. It's so good. Oh, it's so
Delicious
good.
is such a great way of putting it, because I think especially like if you are a lover and appreciator of film and of the art, like the artistry that
Yeah.
goes into filmmaking, from the cinematography. I mean, I'm streaming this, like I'm not watching it on Blu-ray or 4K or anything.
Yeah.
Streaming it on a small TV, and I'm just like, my jaw is dropped because it just looks so beautiful.
I mean, just listening to it just now and feeling the atmosphere through the sound design with you hear some crickets, you hear the wind, you hear his feet on that wooden cross, you hear the rope around his neck, you hear it tightening, you hear him struggling, you hear the despair in his voice, and then you hear the gunshot. And as we know, he shoots the rope and not Tuco himself, which we don't, we're kind of left wondering what's going to happen. And, he falls face first into $100,000, which, I mean, if you think about the equivalent, that's like a few $1 million. That's what that would be like these days. So it's like, but he's got, these things are heavy bags of coins. He's got no horse. He's got no bridge he can cross anymore because he blew it up. He's just out on his own in a cemetery. And
but that seems to be par for the course for Tuco. It's kind of like it's step by step. Like, all right, how am I going to get it? When we first meet him, the three guys go into that bar or the saloon, and I'm not sure if they're like coming to get Tuco, but
that's what I figured since he crashes out of the window.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he doesn't kill them all, but we know he's fast.
Well, let's listen to Tuco's monologue, and this is after he has separated ways with the man with no name, and which is essentially like left for dead in the middle of a desert 70 miles away from the nearest town, and he like manages to make it to the small town. He goes straight to a gun shop and steals a like Frankenstein gun that he creates there from the old shop owner, and like makes a mockery of him. It's like, really, that's the first thing you're gonna do? It's just like,
and I read, and you probably read the same thing, but Eli Wallach like improvised all the stuff he did with the guns.
Yeah,
in that scene,
crazy.
And like he sticks like the like open and closed sign, and then puts it in the guy's mouth, and
it's so bizarre.
Really is, but man, just gives me a lot of respect because I'm thinking about,
and
I was thinking
and
about
this is also a scene where there's very little dialogue.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in this movie. I appreciate it, not just because the more dialogue, more dialogue exposes Clint Eastwood, but as a, in his acting. I don't know. It's like there's no dialogue, but the music and even the cinematography are speaking.
Oh, yeah. And now let's go to this moment right after that where he is in this kind of like weird area and he's got just like a dead
Like
chicken
ruins.
with him.
He's like,
Yeah, it's basically ruins. Yeah. So let's listen to that for a minute.
If you work for a living, why do you kill yourself working? Potatoes. You've got to be poor to eat potatoes. Really poor. I'm rich, but I'm lonely. The world is divided into two parts. Those who have friends, and those who are lonely like Potuco. You see, I used to have a friend, Pedro. Chico and Ramon, his two brothers, were my friends too. But who knows where they are now? It's too bad, friends. Tough luck I haven't found you. I had a good deal for you. There's a big son of a bitch who's got $4,000. $4,000. And I know where to find it. If they would help me catch him, I divide it 4 ways, like a brother. $1,000 each.
You're alive, Tuco. Is it true?
And rich, like you're going to be.
But people are saying you got killed in Albuquerque.
And people talk bullshit. I'm alive, you bastards, and I always will be. And I've come to give you $3,000. Vamos.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, it's so good. I love that monologue, and it really gives him an opportunity. Like, Leone knew where, like, you know, who it was that was going to give audiences the dialogue that they wanted. And he just had the right player, in the form of Eli Wallach. So I actually wanted to share something that it sums it up. So I was looking at the Spaghetti Western database.
Okay.
Spaghetti-Western.
SWDB.
Spaghetti-Western.net. And I have to say, like, this really phrases it well. So I'm just going to read this paragraph. With Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Leone has finally mastered his technique. He slows the pace even more so than in For a Few Dollars More. But the quietness and suspicion that he so skillfully films before his shootouts is far more exciting and spectacular than any action scene. Just the way the characters move and how they act is so beautiful, but his action comes swift and quick and is far less amazing than the build-up. Beg to differ slightly there. But the shootings are the final act to every one of these great moments. The camera work in this film can be seen in all his other films. He mastered the crane shot. He's talking about and it goes on to talk about background action and how it says the plot deals with a gold hunt, but in between this, he films an entire civil war.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I wanted to come back to is how they portray not just the Civil War, but war, and how, like, the scene where where they see the soldiers coming, they think it's the Confederates, but it's really just Union uniforms covered in dust, is so symbolic, and it's so meaningful.
Blue or gray.
And it's like, when you're covered in dust, what does it matter? When you're covered in, gunpowder and ash, it's all the same. And I think that and maybe this is because it's an Italian director. I feel like you'd get that type of treatment now. The kind of, I don't want to call it both sides, but the acknowledgement that the soldiers, even for the opposing army, are still people. They're still humans. And when it comes down to it individually, we have a lot of the same values. And I thought it was really interesting because I feel like at that point in time, like you were saying, the Civil War is still relatively fresh, just 100 years gone by. Yeah. And I don't think you're not going to get that portrayal. I mean, unless it's like Birth of the Nation about how awesome the KKK is.
In the movie, not our opinions.
Yeah, no. In D.W. Griffith's opinion. So I thought that the portrayal, and I really loved this. Another scene where dialogue is important is when they meet this captain.
Yes. So this is towards the end, right before they get to the cemetery, and they know that they're so super close. They just need to cross this bridge, and then they encounter a battleground.
They just walk right into it. They walk like right into the camp.
It's kind of amazing how it's just like, oh, and this is all just right here.
Tuco's like, let's see what's over this way. And yeah.
And also, I'll just play the audio from it. But like, I love the thing. This is a Union captain. And I love the things that he has to say. I think he's a really fun character. I'm not saying that I want to remake this movie and cast a present day actor, but I got real big George Clooney vibes from him.
Oh, okay.
Why? What were you going to say?
I thought you were going to Oscar Isaac because I got some Oscar Isaac vibes from him.
Okay.
I'm just that like weary, Well, you play the clip.
Well, let's listen to it really quick.
You be the judge.
Hey. Whoever has the most liquor to get the soldiers drunk and send them to be slaughtered, he's the winner. We and the ones over on the other side of the river only have one thing in common. All of us reek of alcohol. What did you say your name was? And you? No. Names don't matter.
Yes, because soon you can join the Gallineros from Branston Bridge. We have 2 attacks a day.
2 attacks a day?
Sure. The Rebs have decided that damn bridge is the key to this whole area. Stupid, useless bridge. Flashback on headquarters maps. The headquarters has declared we must take that ridiculous flashback. Even if all of us are killed. Otherwise, the key will get rusty and just be a spot on the wall. And that's not all. Both sides want the bridge intact. Intact is how the South wants it. And we want it intact, too. You'll all turn to dust. But one thing is sure, boys. Branston Bridge will stand unbroken. Is it bad to speak the way I do to volunteers? I've done a lot worse. I've done it. I've blown it up. Boom! In here, I destroyed it all. It's a court-martial offense to imagine, to dream of blowing it up. A serious crime. Even to think of destroying that bridge is just...
Why not really blow it up, Captain?
Yeah, Captain, it's nothing. Let's get the hell out of them.
I've been dreaming about it. I've even worked out a plan. I sure am. The best time is after the attack, when there's a truce to get the wounded. If I could do it, I could save many thousands of men. But what I lack is the guts. The beginning the daily slaughter right on time.
Captain, all companies are awaiting your orders.
Be right there.
I love how this character pops up, a half hour before the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And he's just got these like almost Shakespearean lines like, the daily slaughter begins.
The daily slaughter is right on time. Yeah.
He's so great. By the time, and then, of course, Blondie and Tuco blow up the bridge, and it's kind of this fun. It's almost this fun little sequence when they're just like, don't die yet. You're going to love this. And they're kind of like, no one's paying attention to us. No one's noticing us with these explosives.
I know.
It felt
like, and they really,
it felt like, and I wonder if there was any intentionality in this, but it felt like a knight a knight and his squire, and they're on a quest, and it's kind of like when knights go on quests, and like if you read the Arthurian legends, when knights were on quests, they'd have this one thing, whether I'm going to find the Holy Grail or whatever. But along the way, they would get into other little adventures, other little, side things. So it's kind of like if it was a series, it would, like every episode, it'd be like, oh, well, I can't wait to get to this town and relax. And next thing you know, he's, solving a mystery. Do
you know,
fighting a dragon.
You know what the scene reminded me of?
What?
Wayne's World 2, the gas station attendant. Cooper Street. I once knew a girl who lived on Cooper Street.
Oh, God. Charlton Heston.
Can't we get a better actor?
Oh, and they bring in Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston?
Yes.
Anyway, that's what that reminded me of, because it's just like you said, it's right before the, huge famous ending of a movie. I mean, they didn't know huge famous at the time, but this huge ending of a movie, and you have this very dramatic character just come up out of nowhere and just totally, take you on a journey before going back to the rest of the A plot of the movie.
And there's so much meaning. There's all this I don't know. I think I love just the whole thing about there's one thing that both sides have in common. We all reek of alcohol because everyone's just got to get drunk enough to do this. And I feel like that, I don't know. I have not studied the Civil War enough to know this, but that sounds legit. Or that
right.
It makes so much sense.
And also I love what he says. It's just this is something that even just talking about it, I could get court-martialed, and I know everything I would do on how to do it. All I lack is the guts. And it's just he could end this battle and save lives on both sides just by blowing up the bridge, but he's too afraid of being, court-martialed.
And to add to that, it's also it's commenting, it's really a comment on how headquarters makes the decisions, and just this vague, headquarters wants the bridge to stay, and there's not even General Grant wants the bridge to stay, or and it's so disconnected. And what this movie points out in this scene and in other scenes is how soldiers in a war, or at least maybe in the Civil War, and at least maybe at this point in the Civil War, maybe they don't. What do they have that's personally invested in it? Other than and at what point, I feel like at first you go in with, a lot of motivation and, true patriotism. but you get the sense that these guys have just like been in it so long where it's like, what is happening? Where they're not making their own decisions and they're dying for it. And it's like, well, the headquarters wants this bridge to stay up. So it doesn't matter how many of us get killed. The bridge needs to stay up. And it puts the violence in a perspective, because you have the violence of, you have kind of the, gun for hire violence of Angel Eyes. Whenever I get paid for a job, I see it through. And that's his excuse for killing everybody. Like it really like coldly killing people, like the violence, like their violence, their kind of outlaw violence. Whereas it makes more sense, like even if it, to find money in that time meant a huge difference, especially to someone like Tuco. It puts the violence, like the violence that we see as like these criminals seems so much more justified than the violence that's done in the name of, the government, wearing the uniform of the government or of the rebellion or the insurrectionists.
Well, I mean, and that's why you get these two people coming through who aren't on either side. They're essentially libertarians who come in and, do what neither of the other ones can do. I am not saying my stance on libertarians by saying that, by the way.
No, but these guys, they have nothing invested in. They're not, not their,
they live on the outskirts of anything that anybody would call society at the time. I feel like for Tuco, his life is defined by the hunt. I mean, what's he going to do with all that money? He's not going to just settle down. He's going to...
That was a question I have, is like, is Tuco going to stop?
He's not going to stop stealing stuff.
He's got to keep hustling.
No, it's in his nature to keep on running these grifts and, trying to find the next big thing. And I don't know if he would know what to do with it once he actually... if we were to see what happens the next day.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, but with Tuco. It's like 10 years later, Tuco's like in the Michael Caine role.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So anyway, I know we could talk a lot more, but we're coming up on an hour, and I want to, make sure that we move forward without driving people crazy, just theorizing about the Civil War and things that we are less knowledgeable about.
Exactly. But I think the point is that this movie really does have masterful storytelling, and it's about a lot more than the basic plot. It's about a lot more than three guys looking for money.
No,
it says a lot, and you also see last comment / connection here is with the westerns of Quentin Tarantino, which scored by Ennio Morricone.
Yes. Well, first of all, it would be impossible to do this episode without talking about Quentin Tarantino. Because, of course, I'm watching it for this podcast. I'm thinking like, all right, what could happen if there was any type of thing? And it's just like, well, the only person who would do something like this is Quentin Tarantino, but that's because he has done this. Like almost every one of his movies touches on something that you see in this.
Right.
And,
It made me think of especially, of course, Hateful Eight and Django Unchained, which are both long movies.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about Hateful Eight, which I really like. I saw it in the theater back when we could do such things. And I remember, I saw that in the theater and have watched it since. I've watched, the extended version on Netflix. And as much as I like it because I'm a fan of Quentin Tarantino and I'm a fan of the entire cast. I'm a fan of the entire cast. It doesn't really go anywhere. Like, I know that there's
it's not my favorite. I like it, but it's not my favorite.
I really would have liked to have seen more, and it could have been done in flashback, but it didn't, like, whereas this is a movie that it takes its time, but it feels organic and it feels natural that the story and the characters progress as they do. It moves, it doesn't stand still. Whereas Hateful Eight, I felt, took all the time but kind of stood still.
Yeah.
Django Unchained
is a thrill ride.
I think, and I feel like Django Unchained could have even maybe like slowed down a tiny bit, and like, I love it.
Yes.
But
I want to watch it again. I absolutely love it. It's great. And also, you know, the very first scene of Good, the Bad, the Ugly, you know, with Angel Eyes, it reminds me a lot of the first scene in Inglourious Bastards, where Christoph Waltz is going to the house where he's trying to find, you know, hidden Jews. And, you know, he's, you know, sitting down, and, you know, it's got a very similar vibe to that. And
that giant pipe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. You know, there were a lot of moments where I just saw things happening in other Tarantino movies, you know, even thinking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like the Spawn Ranch stuff. You know, there's a lot of that very like slow, quiet, atmospheric, those moments. And then it, of course, culminates in a fight. And, you know, I got a lot of that Sergio
It's like
Leone
a whole
standoff feeling with
between
that.
Brad Pitt and the Manson family. And
Yeah.
I mean, you know, yeah, it's not a coincidence that it's called Once Upon a Time, ...
Absolutely.
ellipsis.
Yeah. So, all right. We're not going to be doing a Tarantino remake of this movie because he has done what he has to do. So, Dan, what are you thinking?
First of all, I want to go on like on a Sunday. I want to go on a Sunday to I want to go to like Cinerama. I want to go to a theater just with a giant screen and amazing projection. And I want to see this movie on the big screen. And I just want it to be like, I want a day off from any other responsibilities. And I just want to like go in, have a beer, get some nachos, and I don't know why I've never get nachos at the movies. I don't know why that came out of nowhere.
I was going to say, I was like, you're a nachos at the movies guy. Interesting.
No. Straight up popcorn, occasionally an M&M. But like I took a picture of this. It's in my notes, like the cemetery scene or the shootout when there's like this long shot of the three of them, and they're surrounded by all the grave markers. And I'm like, my God, this is beautiful on like this little like TV I have in the office. I want to see this on like this big fucking screen where I have to like, you know, I have to move my head to look from one end to the other. Yeah. So first of all, there's that. And also, by the way, I just noticed, I just saw an ad pop up, but the 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray of Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is coming out on April 27th. So,
oh, okay.
So there we go. I mean, I'm like, this thing looked beautiful the way I saw it. So, but so there's that. I mean, I guess, Tarantino has done it most recently, but I don't know. I think I would want someone I think I would want to see a Western, like not remaking this, but doing something similar, but not like take out the Tarantino element, the Tarantino DNA, and just and really give us the, you know, whatever filmmaker is going to make it, like what's the Western that filmmaker would have made in 1966?
Sure, yeah.
And I don't know who that would be. I don't know who, you know, has that, you know, that sense, that eye, that love, that feel for this. But I mean, I wouldn't do a straight up remake, but I don't know. Like it would have to be really well. It would like.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what I'm thinking here,
John.
Because okay, thinking about Westerns that have come out in the past, I don't know, a couple decades, and the ones that stick out to me, which I think that the ones that I've seen and liked the best have actually been remakes. I love the 3:10 to Yuma remake. The True Grit remake is great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like Coen Brothers would certainly have a field day with this because there are a lot of really funny moments that, you know, they're so good at doing that with. And if you even want to talk about Ballad of Buster Scruggs, you know, talking about this era as told by the Coen brothers, they certainly have not shied away from touching that subject. But I feel like for me, there were so many characters that I would have liked to have seen more of. I think it'd be really fascinating to see a movie that is based on that Union Army captain. You know, how does he get involved with his military service? What does happen leading up to this battle at this bridge? I think it'd also be really fascinating because we go into this movie just knowing that Tuco has a huge backstory. He has wives all over the place that he's abandoned. Like, he's clearly wanted all over the place, and the price on his head keeps on going up and up and up. I'd love to know more about, I'd love to live more in the early Tuco moments where maybe he does have a conflict of character, where he does consider, you know, it's like, I'm finally comfortable. I've got, you know, this wife and this kid and whatever. But then like his instincts drawing him out into like this life of crime.
What if
and
Tuco
like him
was gonna
finding?
Oh, sorry.
What?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just him finding his place and like being the ugly.
What if he was considering the priesthood?
Well, that's another thing, is like seeing how things went with the early family life. I don't know.
Do you have a casting? Do you have?
I don't have a cast or any directors or anything, but those are the storylines that I would like to see developed into something new.
Would you? I imagine that your casting would be you'd cast a Mexican actor.
Casting would be nationality appropriate.
Yes. I was thinking, I was like, if you did a remake, I'm like, it would be so wrong, but like Paul Giamatti as Tuco.
Oh my God.
I'm like, I wouldn't be okay with it, but I'd be very interested.
Yeah, nope. Pass on that. No. I mean, I feel like if I could think of a director, you know, one movie that I actually did, well, I love the Desperado. Is it a trilogy?
The mariachi trilogy, yeah.
El Mariachi trilogy, yeah. You know, with
Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
Once Upon a Time
there
in Mexico, I really enjoyed. And so I feel like Robert Rodriguez would be, I mean, clearly he and Tarantino are, you know, linked to each other in a lot of ways. But
Troublemaker. That's Robert Rodriguez.
I think that Robert Rodriguez would be a good person to cover this territory. It's been a while since he's done something with this kind of vibe. So anyway, if I had to pick someone off the top of the dome, you know,
I would be really interested to see a like Robert Rodriguez, but Robert Rodriguez trying to put himself in the 1960s.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, what was I just thinking of with, and of course, like Danny Trejo would be in it. And
Danny Trejo would be in it for sure.
I mean, Danny, like I would just have him as, you know, whatever, the man with no name. But I think Danny Trejo is like 90 or something. It's like, when I found out how old he was, I was like, what?
Well, I mean, you see pictures from like the early 90s of him and you're just like, oh, I feel like looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Something feels very familiar about this.
Yeah. So anyway, but the Coens, I was thinking about the Coens, and I think the only reason why I didn't go all in on the Coens was even something like No Country for Old Men, which is contemporary, it's still got this Western vibe and it's more along the lines of Once Upon a Time in America, not Once Upon a Time in the West, where Henry Fonda's character is like really this like stone cold killer, not nearly as
friendo,
not nearly at the level of Shiger in No Country for Old Men. But
and
Javier Bardem would be a good Man with No Name.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And also just thinking about Tarantino and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Rick Dalton is essentially Clint Eastwood. Was it Bounty Law that he was on, which is like, that's Rawhide, and then he goes off to do spaghetti westerns.
Yeah. Well, although I feel like he's even more washed up, whereas like Eastwood was,
he was still pretty fresh.
Yeah. But no, it's funny. Yeah, it's almost like if we got to see, I guess, a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that just focuses on, his making spaghetti westerns.
Which, by the way, the term spaghetti western always cracks me up. And like, I always wonder like, what if they...
Well, go ahead.
What were you going to say?
Does anyone ever find it offensive?
I don't know. I don't know. What I was going to say is, what if they hadn't landed on spaghetti and they were called like lasagna westerns?
A lasagna western.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah, no. A good ravioli western.
But, I mean, it's whoever coined that term, that's a lot of fun. It's, Italian, westerns made in Italy, or I guess made by Italian directors.
Yeah. But, And speaking of, and I'll just put it out there again, definitely highly recommend Once Upon a Time in the West. It's also like early Charles Bronson. I guess I never had really seen Charles Bronson in anything much. And I've been watching, like, I think it was like I saw The Great Escape and some other things. I'm like, man, Charles Bronson in the 60s was cool.
The Great Escape, was that his first?
No.
I think that might have been one of his first. But
one of his.
I mean, I've definitely seen Death Wish. I haven't seen any of the canon sequels.
I haven't
seen pictures.
I haven't seen Death Wish yet. I saw The Mechanic.
Death Wish. The I want to say first appearance of Jeff Goldblum on the big screen.
I think that's part of it because he plays like a rapist, and I'm like, I don't want to see rapey Jeff Goldblum.
Well, I mean, I have some bad news for you then.
Well, Transylvania 65000.
No, I was going to say real life.
I have not been on the news today.
He is no. Let's just say he is an overly flirty person to a point where maybe some people have felt a little uncomfortable. That's all.
No.
That's all.
I had not heard this about Jeff Goldblum. That makes me sad. Yeah, no, Charles Bronson was in stuff. He was in, The Great Kid Galahad with Elvis Presley in 1962. He was in X-15 in 1961, actually filmed in space. A Thunder of Drums. He was on an episode of The Twilight Zone. So anyway, but that's Charles Bronson, and he co-stars with Henry Fonda and Jason Robards in Once Upon a Time in the West.
Jason Robards. God, just the best.
But it's almost like I would be interested to do a film festival of all of the Once Upon a Time ins because they are linked. Like there's a reason why Rodriguez and Tarantino have named their films, the Once Upon a Time in, because the Once Upon a Time in the West is like just this classic Western. It's not, I don't like it as much as Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but that was excellent. And then Once Upon a Time in America, I haven't seen in a long time, but I remember that being really, really good. And it's got, De Niro, James crazy James Woods.
So I do have to mention one problem that I have with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I say this understanding that this was not a thing at the time, but I really want to put a comma before the ugly. And the ugly.
Yeah.
There was no Oxford comma at that time, but man, oh man, does it feel like I just want to scribble it in there? Because then it's just like the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. It's like the good, the bad, and the ugly.
The bad and the ugly.
No, you know what? I guess I just hadn't, I hadn't noticed that. And now I'm dropping.
You're a language arts teacher, Dan.
Hold on. I need to revise my Letterboxd rating. But I don't think
the Oxford comma wasn't a thing at the time. It's okay.
All right,
it's okay.
We're going to let it go.
That's all. But why don't we talk about what we're going to do on the next episode, which is a big swing.
Oh, yeah. No.
A hard left turn.
Yeah. So, no, for our next episode, we are revisiting an early 90s action classic. It's Wham Bam Van Dam. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Jean-Claude Van Damme in Double Impact.
I am so excited.
I can't wait. I literally might go start watching it as soon as we're done.
Well, I am very, very excited. And Dan, as you cling on to the back of a runaway train, I bid you a good journey.
Good journey.